You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to Tea Break Time Travel, where every month we look at a different archaeological object and take you on a journey into their past. Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of Tea Break Time Travel. I'm your host, Matilda, and today I am savouring a fruity number, a strawberry and kiwi fruit tea. Joining me on my tea break today is Ashleigh Airey, archaeologist and owner of Ashwoodcandles. What are you drinking today, Ash?
Well, I have a bit of a confession for you. I don't drink tea. I know. It's such an awkward thing. Every single time I go to someone's house, I'm so sorry, I don't drink tea or coffee, and they don't know what to do.
No coffee either. Oh,
no,
man,
no coffee either. I know.
But is there a reason? Like, is it just... Is it because there's so many different flavors? I'm sorry, by the way. No judgment at all if for people who don't drink tea. It's fine.
It's fine.
Accept your life choices. But, yes. But is it like, just because I'm just thinking there's so many different, like today I'm drinking strawberry and kiwi fruit tea. Like it's more like a hot juice really than anything else. Like is it all teas or is it the hotness?
Yeah, it's pretty much all hot beverages. I feel like I'm a toddler still, like I can't quite regulate my own body temperature. So if I drink something that's warm, I just get too hot.
Interesting.
And I can't deal with it. Yeah, I really can't deal with it.
What about then iced tea?
Iced tea. I could do some iced tea. It has to have a lot of sugar in it though. I'm a bit of a sugar fiend. But yeah, teas are no go for me, unfortunately, which is always really difficult when you're traveling in the Highlands because everyone wants to offer you tea. True. And then they go, okay, well, what about coffee? And you go, oh, no coffee, thank you. And that happened, when I first met my partner's family. And eventually I ended up having a bit of vodka because I just thought, well, what else is coming? I need to say it.
I like that. Tea, coffee, vodka.
Yeah, it pretty much went tea, coffee, milk, juice, water. Well, she doesn't like water, his granny, so that was a no-go. If I said water, it was just absolute no. Yeah, eventually vodka came up and I was like, I need to say yes because it's going to get stronger and I need to drink right now. So it was very nice.
And I assume cold vodka, not hot vodka. That would have sucked, right? If they were like vodka and then they warm it up before you do it like a hot toddy.
Yeah, with like a biscuit or something. Yeah, it wouldn't have been nice. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Oh, interesting. No, but I do know the feeling because, for example, I never used to like just black tea, or if I did, then I'd have it like with a lot of sugar or something. And then whenever you go, indeed, traveling or anything, and everyone always has like black tea as the sort of standard. Mm-hmm. And then in the UK, they also give it to you with milk, which I never drank mine with milk. And I was always like, sorry, I don't know. But actually, recently, I've tried it with milk and I really like it now. So now I always have every morning some black tea with milk, which, part of me is going, oh, God. And then the British ancestry in me is going, well done. But
I think I should be exiled or something for not drinking tea in Britain. I think it's not great.
There is I can't remember what it is. It's some like little cartoon. I had it for ages as my like cover on Facebook or something, which is like Anarchy in the UK. Do you want a cup of tea? No.
Yeah, that's me. Absolute chaos in a bundle. Yeah.
Or the great, there's like the 99 British Problems thing, that Twitter account, and one of them's like, do you drink tea? Oh, I'm sorry, I don't drink tea. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
Yeah, I'm always worried in case that does actually happen to me.
But so you're based in the UK. Whereabouts are you coming from at the moment as you speak? Like where are you
just
based?
Outside of Glasgow at the moment.
Okay. That's fine. And you're also from there originally, or are you?
No, I'm from Newcastle, the north of England originally, and I moved to Glasgow about a decade ago now. So probably like a little bit. Probably like 9 years, for university, and then I just stayed here, just never left.
Yeah, well, it is as someone born in Scotland, I could say I can understand why.
Yeah,
why we love Scotland. But and so at uni you studied archaeology? Yeah,
I did a joint degree, so I did archaeology and history, and then I stayed at Glasgow Uni for my masters as well, which I did in material culture and artifact studies, and I just stayed and continued on.
Oh, fair enough. Mm-hmm. But then funnily enough, I also did my master's was, archaeological science, but material culture studies, like as the aspect of it with that kind of thing. Out of curiosity, what was your final thesis topic?
Mine was on the pottery in Iona. So medieval pottery of Iona, and I also did independent research. So it was split in a different way. So you could do a independent research project, and you could do a internship as well. Okay. So I went to a commercial unit for that, and then you did a bit of a thesis as well on whatever you fancied. So mine was Iona.
Okay, cool. Out of curiosity, you because you just said you do commercial stuff as well. I know that. I mean, I really love doing the artifact studies and because I have to say I like field work. I'm happy to do it every so often, but I am definitely one of those people who much prefer to be in the nice, dry, warm lab post excavation analysis. Are you similar, or do you like the field work aspect?
Well, no, I was a commercial archaeologist. I was a supervisor for 3 years, so I was a project archaeologist, and then I went on to be a supervisor in Scotland. So I liked field work a lot. But I also did like the lab work and finds work as well. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm just too, it's sort of whenever anyone, but so many of our colleagues love field work, right? I mean, you just said you really like field work as well. So I always think I'm not stealing, people's work. I don't necessarily need to spend my whole life getting up at 5 a.m. to go out into a muddy field. So no, definitely not. You don't have to. You don't have to at all. If there's another option, I'm sure a lot of people would take it. But I think that's the best thing about archaeology is that there's so many different aspects of it that you can go into. Yes. That it's quite a lot of there's a lot of free reign in it.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm not saying, by the way, if any potential future employers listening in, I'm not saying I don't like field work, because I do feel like that. But I'll do the post-ex stuff. But yeah, so you studied archaeology, continued then doing commercial archaeology. How did the candles start?
So that started when the pandemic started, really. I had a big, so I had a real difficulty with my mental health during that time, that period. And there was a lot of stuff going on in my personal life as well. And my employers at the time were really understanding about it. And I felt like I couldn't continue in commercial. I couldn't be away from my family for too long, which was the best decision in the end. And I needed something to kind of channel my anxiety into. And if someone suggested candles, and I'd always wanted to make them. And I thought, gosh, why not? Might as well. Yeah. So I tried and I did it. And then, it took a lot of work to try and get to where we are now. And it's a whole new skill. So it just started with the pandemic. And I think that's the story of a lot of candle makers, actually. So they start in the pandemic. Yes. So that's how it sort of changed. And I thought, well, I want to visit all these sites, but I can't because I'm stuck in my house and, there's a big bad virus out there. So why don't I try and make scents that fit the sites I've been to and that I love and try and sell them to everyone else so they can experience it.
Yeah. I mean, it's so cool how you managed to, we'll talk about that a bit more in a sec. I'm just thinking I've got my archaeologist desk candle next to me. And I mean, the other ones as well. Which one do I have upstairs now? I can't remember. I switch them around occasionally. But it is so cool how you managed to get all those scents. They work so well. And some of them are almost, you smell them and you're like, I have to admit, some of them I smell and I'm like, I wouldn't necessarily use this as like a candle to make my room smell nice, but when I smell it, I do smell the site. It gives you the feeling like it's sort of a different kind of smell, if that makes sense.
For me, I really like earthy smells. I think that's my go-to. I really like herbal and woods, and that's what I always try and choose. And I think that's probably the scent that would have been quite prevalent in history and prehistory too. And usually a lot of my sites that I choose are prehistoric sites. I'm just drawn to that. I need to sort of move away from it. I think I might have overdone them a bit.
But
I do love them. Well, no, currently I have Brodgar and Stonehenge right in front of me. So yeah.
I was eyeing up the Stonehenge one. I might have to order that on my next time over.
Yeah, well, it's different from the one in the British Museum, which is great. Yeah, this one is more reflective of its Neolithic and Bronze Age, while the scent that's in the British Museum is reflective of its whole period. From the Mesolithic timber hall, so that's the kind of oak and hazelnuts. And then until the big icon that it is today, that's kind of what they wanted. So that's what I tried to produce.
Very cool. Oh, that must have been so exciting when they asked you. For those who are wondering what we're talking about, by the way.
Oh, sorry.
We were chatting about this a little bit before we started recording. But so for people who don't know, well, maybe you want to say, Ash.
Oh, yeah, no, we are a supplier to the British Museum for the World of Stonehenge exhibition, which has been great.
Yeah, so fancy, so cool. It must be so exciting. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to going and seeing the exhibit at some point when I can get down there.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
But so prehistory is always where you would sort of focus on? Like, for example, if you could travel back in time, or I guess you're forward in time, but, I'm assuming as we're archaeologists, we'll probably want to go back in time. Where would you go? Like, what time period or where and why?
I get this. People ask me this all the time. I think it's just like that question that people ask archaeologists. But
dinosaurs.
Oh gosh. Or, when did you decide you wanted to create buildings?
Yes. This woman was talking to me for ages about there was this really nice and she was describing all these really lovely buildings in this town, and I didn't want to interrupt her and be like, that's architecture.
I'm so sorry, but it's not the same thing.
It's not me. Anyway, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, no, I've thought about this a lot, and I think it would have to be somewhere where that was fairly equal. But in society, I think it would be absolutely suck to go back in time and then end up not being as equal as society, even though it's unequal today. But I'm that saying, if I could go in like a bubble and watch, right?
Yes.
Be accused of being a witch or something like that, then I think I would probably have to go. I'd love to go back to the Mesolithic. I'd love to see Doggerland, even or Starkar. Those sites that you think about today and you think, wow. And I'd love to see how they had their hair, how they spoke, what their names were, stuff like that. I think I'd love to go to the Mesolithic. Either that or I'd go back to Iron Age Britain and maybe go see Boudica, maybe hold her hand.
Yes. That was so cool. It is funny how they're so, they're always lumped together in sort of popular literature and stuff as prehistory or the Stone Age. But then, the Mesolithic and the Neolithic are so different.
Very different.
I have to say the Mesolithic to me is almost too distant, if that makes sense. I don't know, it's sort of, which is really intriguing, but then I guess to me it's the sort of, I don't know, it's a weird time period for me. I don't know why.
It is I think it's because we don't know a lot about it. I mean, we know lithic scatters, we know maybe a bit of settlement patterns and stuff, but we don't know a lot. We don't know their language or what their language was or how they interacted as groups. Their structures, you can kind of start to understand that in the Neolithic because you have farming and that change and people are settling down and in the landscape. But in the Mesolithic, you've got people moving around a lot, and I think we don't quite understand fully the extent of how much they travelled and how much that was part of their everyday life cycles as well.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. I always find it fascinating. I'd love to go back and just see what it was like.
Yeah. Although it's also that thing, someone was asking me this the other day, but would you time travel if you could? And actually part of me was like, hells yes. But then part of me was like, actually, I don't know, because one of the things that I really love about archaeology is that it is kind of so unknown, really.
Yeah.
What exactly happened.
There's a lot of questions, and I think it would be kind of rubbish, wouldn't it? If you go, oh well, actually, what I thought was actually a bit cooler than what was real. That would be rubbish.
This is really boring.
It was great! I thought it was matrilineal power and so cool. But oh god, it's just a guy, just a white guy again. Oh my god, that would be really, really upsetting. But yeah, I think you're right. There is something quite distant about the Mesolithic and even the Paleolithic in Europe. I think it feels very, very very far away.
Yeah, right. What was I reading the other day? Oh, that Kindred, the book, the Neanderthal book. And I've started reading it.
Yeah, I've got to read that.
Excellent work, Becky, by the way, if you're listening. I doubt she's listening to this, but you never know.
You never know.
It's so good. I really like it. And it is funny, she was saying, if you think about the whole of human time span, that we've been alive, millions of years we've been alive, and yet the last couple of thousand, are actually then just a small blip, little, what's the word? I'm saying blick because that's German, but I can't remember what it is.
A snapshot of time.
Snapshot,
a blip of time.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. English mother's going to be here. haven't been living here too long. But yet, like you say, like even the Mesolithic, which is relatively recent in terms of human history compared to like the Paleolithic and even, before then, and like previous human species. But anyway.
I would be mad. It would be mad.
So thank you very much, anyway, for joining me on my tea break today.
Oh.
And we are here to look at a particular object type. And most of you have probably guessed what the object is. Before we go into detail, let's first journey back, speaking of time travel, nearly 3,300 years to ancient Egypt, and specifically the city of Amarna, although back then it was known as Akhetaten. It was a hot day, but the night is now drawing in. It's finally getting cooler. The shadows from the surrounding cliffs are lengthening over the tops of the whitewashed mud brick buildings. A breeze wafts the scent of the Nile across the street towards you, and you shiver as you enter your house. It's dark inside, so your fingers fumble in the darkness, and after a few moments, there's the faint hiss of ignition, and a soft golden glow illuminates the room. The light comes from a flickering flame burning through a wick made from twisted reeds encased in tallow. Of course, this is a candle. And the earliest written evidence of what we would consider as modern candles comes from this site, and that's what we're looking at today. So we'll get into the details of the history of these objects soon, but first, I thought it might be fun to look at the most asked questions on the internet about candles, courtesy of Google search and autofill. So I basically just typed in, are candles and what are candles, and saw what came up. And so the first question is, are candles bad for you? What would you say to this, Ash?
Oh gosh, you've hit on some really big topics in candle making, almost accidentally. But I think candles, you're burning them, right? So you're going to be releasing toxins and potentially definitely carbon into the atmosphere. So I think it's really candles, when you're looking at them, and if you're a purchaser and if you're a maker, you have to really have one key thing in mind, and that is how moderation and sustainability. For example, you kind of need to look at three things, and this is what I decided to break it down into. Okay, you need to look at the type of wax you're using, the type of wick, and the materials that the candle maker is using to make the candle. So it could be it's a pillar candle, or it could be tins and glass.
Okay,
because essentially what's going to happen is, if you get something from your local shop, right, which is usually made out of paraffin, when paraffin burns, it can contain a number of carcinogenics. And so it's unsustainable because it's a byproduct of crude oil. Okay. So, so it's going to release toxins anyway. The type of fragrance that you're using as well, that can release toxins into the environment. So it has to be in moderation. I think that's pretty much the answer for that, if they're bad for you or not. They're neither good nor bad for you. They're just candles. So you have to, you have to decide how much to use them and when you're going to use them.
And I guess that sort of partly answers the second one that came up as well, which was, are candles bad for the environment?
Yeah, so I think it kind of does, actually. Yeah, candles can be. Okay, I can say anything can be bad for the environment.
I was about to say, everything that we do nowadays technically is bad for the environment.
Yeah, it's like kind of deciding what car you should drive, if you should go electric, diesel, or petrol. It's kind of the same for candles, in very layman's terms. So for me, making candles, I wanted to do it in the best way I possibly could. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to impact the environment too much. So I used soy wax. It's a plant-based wax. It's biodegradable. And I make sure that I choose non-GMO soy wax. Okay. Probably the best wax that you could get to make a candle out of is beeswax. But you'd have to get it that's ethically sourced.
Yes.
Beeswax. Yeah. And because the soy and beeswax are clean burning, they're not going to give you the same issues that paraffin has. Where, if you burn it, it's going to release toxins. So yeah, it can be bad for the environment, but again, it's all about moderation and what you're giving back to that environment too.
I know. So you just mentioned a couple of different materials, because the next question was, what are candles made from? So I guess the paraffin would be the commercial ones, and then there was soy, beeswax are there. What are the wicks made from generally?
They can be made from hemp or cotton. They can also have a kind of layering of them of wax, which could be paraffin. So you have to be careful about what wicks you're actually going to choose. They can release certain wicks are self-trimming. So modern wicks are self-trimming or self-consuming, which just means that when you burn them, they sort of start to limp and bend over, and that'll be consumed by the flame.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So that came about later on in industrialization. You kind of got those self-trimming wicks. You can also get wood wicks as well. And so there's a lot of questions about the materials that you use, and you really need to look into it as a candle maker to make sure that you are making the best decisions for the environment and also giving back to that environment. So, trying to use biodegradable materials in your packaging, glass and tins, which can be reused or recycled. And obviously tins there's a bit of a debate about tins because a lot of metal mining and things. So there's a huge questions in candle making about what's right and what's not. And I think it's up to the candle maker and it's up to the buyer, the consumer, to make these decisions and to really look into it.
Yeah. We have so the final question, I'll finish these ones up and then we can get to our questions, of the Google search thing was, what are candles used for? And I guess, anything really. But what would you say? Oh,
well, I think nowadays in modern times, candles are used as a decorative item a lot of the time. You get a lot of kind of aesthetic candles, which can be like a figure of a lady or a man, sculpted candles, pillar candles, or you can get the ones like we do, which, show you a different side of candle making, of a kind of theme, I suppose. But candles essentially, in basic terms, are made for illumination.
I'm really curious what that question was about. Like on this Google search, I mean, unless it was someone who really didn't know what a candle was.
Maybe
what are candles used for? Maybe they wanted it for some ritual purpose. I'm not sure really. But,
there's a lot of ritual candles that you can get out there that are made specifically for each element and in rituals and kind of worship as well. So there's lots of different answers to that question.
If we move on now and sort of talk about kind of candles in the past and everything, I think because when I was originally looking into candles to make the little videos, I was looking and there was a lot of, because the oil lamps kind of came earlier, because I guess they were also for illumination and everything. But actually so apparently there is indeed this evidence of candles in Amana in like 3,300 years ago. But I had found that the earliest written evidence was also from the Romans in 500 BC, that they had these kind of tallow, so rendered animal fat candles with a wick in them, because I guess that is different. If you have a solid thing rather than the liquid, then it makes a bit of a difference in how you can illuminate them. So I'm not sure, how solid. I did find the reference. Someone was very nice to send me the reference for the Egyptian candles, but I still am not sure whether it was solid.
Yeah, I found it difficult to find the reference for that candle. I couldn't find any kind of archaeological evidence to say that the Egyptians had candles, but many candle sites that go on about the history of candles, and historians talk about it, but I cannot find a reference or even an artifact.
Well, this is the thing. So I found references to them, but then it seemed to more imply that they were still something that was dipped in oil and then burned, rather than
or more like a rushlight, which is kind of like a reed that you dip in oil, and it would soak up the oil, and then you'd light it. The Egyptian one was interesting, but in antiquity, you get right about the Romans. I had that around. Some people said it was around 100 BCE. Some people said it was 500 BCE. The one that I seem to think is 500 BCE, and they did have their oil lamps, and they were rolling tallow, like you said.
Yes. Yeah.
But you also have the early Greeks doing something similar with them. They have these cakes called moon cakes, which are meant to be lit for the goddess Artemis during ceremonies and worship, essentially. And then they put a candle on that cake and light it. And a lot of people are saying that this is where the first kind of birthday cake candle comes in. It is quite interesting. But there are oil lamps as well that were used for Saturnalia in Roman times and in the Greek. So it seems like people are using candles a lot, but obviously they don't survive in the archaeological record.
This is the problem, right? Like it was so. I don't know if do you know Terry Pratchett? I'm slightly obsessed with his books.
I've only read Going Postal.
Oh, that's a great one though. That's the one I started with, I think. But spoiler alert for anyone listening and for you, so apologies in advance. But basically there's this one where they're trying to solve a murder because, well, no, it's not even murder, but attempted murder or whatever. And Lord Vetinari, the patrician, is getting poisoned and they don't know what it is. And they're trying all these different things and they're trying to work out, what is possibly poisoning him, because he seems like better during the day, but then in the morning again, he's all bad again. And they're trying to work out what it is. And basically it's the candles. But of course, because they're burnt down, they're gone. The evidence is gone by the time it goes. And it made me think like, oh God, yeah, that's so true of so many consumable things in the past as well, right? Like candles. So I mean, it's how do we see that actually in the archaeological record?
Yeah, it's so difficult. It's very difficult. And the only thing you can really look at are the artifacts that relate to candle making or candle use. So it could be a dish. When you look at oil lamps have the little vessel that you use to put the oil in, but they don't obviously have the piece of cotton or woven fabric that you have that runs out of the oil lamp. That's consumed and used, and so is the oil, and only maybe remains of the oil are left. So it's the same thing for candles. If you try and, that's the only thing that can possibly happen. The only really physical evidence, archaeological evidence that we have for candles being used in prehistory is in China in 200 BCE.
Yes.
Yes. And that's in Qin Shi Huang's tomb, which is the terracotta army tomb that people know of.
Oh, that must have been such a cool find. Can you imagine?
I know. I'm so jealous. I know. And it seems like the candles that were found in there, I read a few different articles about it. Now, one of them, I don't know how real this is, but they were made from whale fat, the candles. So that is true. But they said that when they first opened the tomb, there was still illumination going on. Which sounds fantastical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I wish my candles lasted that long.
Right.
I think I'd be out of the tub. I wouldn't have to keep using them over and over again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the ultimate sustainable candle.
Yeah, really. God, it hit the jackpot there. And, you can look later on, the historian Sima Qian, he talks about this tomb and he tells you that lamps were filled with whale oil so that they might have the longest possible burn time, which is quite interesting. But then again, he's talking about lamps rather than candles themselves. Yeah. But there were artifacts found in the tomb that had kind of like a picket, which is the place where you'd put a pillar candle on top and you'd secure it, press it down onto the pitch. So they did have, the hollows inside of them did have whale wax, we'll call it, in them. So that's the first archaeological evidence that we actually have of candles.
Which is still pretty impressive because that was, 200 BC? So, I mean, still just over 2,000 years ago, which is kind of, amazing to think that, I mean, has the design, I guess, hasn't really changed that much. I mean, like you say, they have the sort of decorative ones now as well, where you have like it in sculpted forms and stuff. But in general, considering how much a lot of things have changed, even in the last 100 years or, since the Industrial Revolution, I mean, actually candles themselves are still pretty similar to in prehistory then.
It seems like they're very similar. I mean, you still have to have a vessel. So that could be nowadays, it could be glass or tin, even ceramic sometimes. Yeah. People in prehistory seem to have used ceramic. So they don't change that much. I think their function changes over time though. And maybe what the candle means. It could just be an illumination, or it could be conspicuous consumption, as in this tomb here. The massive artifacts that are found in that tomb tell you a lot about the emperor, that he is very much wealthy and that he has a lot of stuff. And he has a lot of candles and a lot of art here and a lot of horses and things. So he's using it a lot. And candles will have been used frequently during that period. It seems like it anyway. Yeah. I think the intention and the use of candles changes over time rather than the shape of them.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I guess the materials as well, because originally it would have been this tallow, and I had seen somewhere that beeswax was used, but it was very expensive. So actually it was only used by indeed wealthy people or for churches or something like that. And then now you have soy, you mentioned as well. So.
Yeah, soy gets introduced much later. But yeah, the change comes in. So basically you have people using things like rushlights, whale fat. It's often animal fat. The tallow that you're talking about, Romans start using tallow and processed animal fat to create these candles. But you also get people boiling cinnamon in India for temple candles to make a wax. Yeah. And interestingly enough, there's a fish that they call a candlefish that's used a lot in indigenous tribes in North America which is literally dry this fish out, plop it on a stick and light it, and it will burn for a long time because of the oil inside this fish. Yeah. So there's quite a lot of ways people have used illumination or have tried to create illumination in different means and things like that. In the Middle Ages, though, you do get the tallow being used quite often. And that's often attributed to the decline of the Roman Empire. So you don't have olive oil as coming into Europe as often as it should or did. So that means that you get a rise in processed animal fat candles, which tallow smells really bad.
I was just thinking, I mean, gosh, I did some experiments because I do a lot of experimental archaeology and I needed to use sealskin for something. And I mean, luckily, if you can call it luckily, so I was in contact with a seal sanctuary in the north of the Netherlands, and they had one of their animals who had unfortunately died of natural causes. And they said, if you need any materials from them, like, you're welcome to take them for, scientific purposes. So I went and I got the skins and the bones and all sorts of things. And I had to scrape the skin, so scrape the fat off the skin in order to, sort of process it. And oh my God, the smell. And then I was not cooking because I wasn't planning to eat it, but like basically I was trying to boil it down to get the meat out so that I could just have it as kind of solid fat, because I was giving that to another friend who was doing experiments with residue analysis and looking at whether you can see fat on the inside of pots and stuff. And yeah, the smell, like, so just the imagining a candle made from that would just be
it was apparently awful because they're made from sheep and cows, predominantly the fat. And actually, strangely enough, in the 13th century, in the medieval period, production of tallow candles was banned from cities because it smelled so bad. Yeah, in many European cities, it was banned. They didn't have the scented candles, eucalyptus and lavender.
Stonehenge scent.
No, don't have that at all. So it would be very, very difficult. And imagine having that in your house as well, So that's why a lot of the time when you're using tallow or even beeswax, like you were talking about before, it's usually in churches that people seem to use candles like that.
I suppose, especially if you have big groups of people inside and you don't want to smelling. And interesting. I'm curious. So, I mean, we talked briefly about the fact that the original candles found in China, so the Emperor Qin Shi Huang, and the fact that, it's seen as almost a sign of, you can afford all these different candles and everything. But I guess when you think of archaeological objects, like if, for example, you think of that emperor's tomb, the first thing that springs to mind is not, oh, wow, and he had the coolest collection of candles. Like there's some other objects that are weirdly given priority. And I guess that sort of happens a lot in archaeology, I guess going back from the start, but that you have, all the kind of, shall we say, the sexy objects are kind of given more importance. And then things like candles or other, almost the forgotten parts, also other consumables, I suppose, are left behind. But I mean, why, as a candle person yourself, I mean, why would you say it's important to look at these more forgotten objects?
Well, I think that they're everyday, aren't they? As archaeologists, we don't look at the fantastic stuff every day. We look at the very normal, bog standard objects, pots and vessels and things that people would use day to day life. And I think candles they tell you a lot about a society. So there is no evidence for this at all, but you'd think that during the Neolithic, if people are farming and they're farming crops, they might have been able to farm something, not necessarily soy, but something that could help them illuminate. People search for illumination in human history since the very beginning. There's many myths about hearths and how important the hearth is. A candle is just a small hearth, really.
Yeah.
It's brought in as a ceremonial thing. It's brought in to illuminate the darkness, to scare away the darkness. Candles are very, very important in human history because, well, they just are. I mean, people use them all the time now. It's not a big leap to think that people would have used them in the past or used fire in some way to have a longer longevity of that fire, of that illumination. You know, people would have used candles for timing things as well. If people can build stuff that calculates, you know, solstice and winter solstice, then they can definitely make a candle that tells them when the daylight is dropping or when night is coming and how long that night has been around for. That's my theory anyway, but there's no actual archaeological evidence to support that theory yet.
Unfortunately. I mean, that's the thing, right? I've noticed that so much with other things as well. For example, I've recently had a baby, and when you then are having to, for example, breastfeed and do all these different things, and you know, and then I was looking at some point, it came up a paper about Neolithic clothing, for example, and I was looking at it going, that would be impossible to breastfeed in. Like, you wouldn't be able to. And it's so funny that when you think of, yes, for example, something like candles, you know, and it's like you say, it's always assumed that they had some ritual purpose or they were really fancy. And it's one of those, actually, you know, why couldn't they have just been used for the everyday? Like, why could little everyday issues that people have nowadays aren't new necessarily?
Yeah, I think we are detached from that sort of need for fire because we have electricity, we have lights all the time, we have street lights, you know. We are constantly illuminated in our world, especially if you live in the West. I mean, your TV illuminates a room. But back in prehistory, the light would have been really important. I mean, life didn't just stop because it got dark. Yes. You know, I think people, because we don't have this evidence, even for things like rushlights or anything like that yet, then it's very difficult to know what people were doing. And therefore, as archaeologists, we always put it down to ritual, which is it's not a good old word. It's not necessarily the right interpretation. And I think it would be kind of potentially silly to assume that people weren't using fire in a different way other than the hearth, that central sort of hearth or hearth that you get, that was just pretty much a prevalent thing throughout prehistory. I mean, the amount of hearths I've dug.
True, yes,
But, you know, I think people would have moved around. And also think of the waste that you would have if you had a torch. So if you had a piece of woven fibre, you've just spent all that time weaving some fibre. You're going to wrap it around a torch and then light it on fire. I don't know about that. You know, so that's my theory anyway.
No, I think it's a good point. And I mean, I guess like you say, the problem is that it's one of those things that you don't necessarily have evidence for. And I mean, the problem with archaeology is it's a lot of hypothesis, but at the end of the day, you can't really, for example, publish anything or make big assumptions about things without being able to back yourself up. Kind of
Completely. And that's a legitimate thing. Like, there's a reason why people aren't going around saying the Neolithic had candles. You know?
Well, we are now. It's here on the podcast. Everyone who's listening is like, oh yes, I heard it on the podcast. The Neolithic had candles.
Maybe not candles in the way that we see them today, but some sort of form of light. I think transferable light would have been pretty, I think, easy to make. Yeah.
Well, and that's again one of the reasons why I love archaeology, is that you have, you know, it's all about trying to imagine yourself a little bit back there. I mean, that's why, you know, we're doing this time travel thing as well. Like, it's all about sort of pretending to time travel a bit, imagining yourself in that situation. And obviously it's difficult because we're so kind of wrapped up in our own modern time period and, you know, our own experiences. But I think there's a lot of things that are not necessarily that different that we have to deal with, like darkness. You know, it was the same darkness back then, like you say.
Yeah, exactly. And you only have to go to somewhere that's a little bit more remote to realize, oh my God, I can't see a thing. Yeah. A torch would be really handy right now. Yeah. You know, and I think you're right. When you start to experience things more, like with you when you had your baby and you're breastfeeding, you're looking at clothing, that just doesn't feel entirely correct. How on earth would you get your boob out. Like,
yeah, right?
you know, like, how is that going to happen? The same thing applies for many stuff. Like that's the practical thinking brain, which is a good thing to have in archaeology, because you go, well, why would you do that when you could do this? Or it makes you think.
Yeah. Which, fun times. Don't do that archaeology. I mean, that's why we're here, right? That's why we're here. There's a lot we could say, I guess, about candles, but I did want to also talk a bit. So we did already introduce you a little bit in the first sort of section of this episode, but maybe, we could go into a bit more detail. So we already mentioned Ashwood candles briefly and sort of how you got into it. And I mean, candles, for example, I know that you also do the wax melts. I mean, was there anything in particular about candles that struck you as something rather than, I mean, you said that you had done pots, for example, as your thesis topic. Were you never tempted to go in that direction?
I was definitely. I think I always just want to make things. I think that's why I specialized in artifacts, is the making process of something, of creating something. It's good for the soul, one, but it also connects you back to people who have done it in the past. Candle making became a very big thing in the medieval period. And it was much needed. And, chandlers that's the name for a candle maker. Or sometimes they also made soaps and cheeses and loads of different things, actually.
I was about to say, it's a very random assortment of things. Someone one day put a very weird set of skills and was like, I'm going to call myself a chandler now.
A chandler. So I've got it here, actually. They made sauces, vinegar, soap, and candles and cheese.
Interesting.
So that was kind of...
You don't want to get your ingredients mixed up, would you?
No. Oh my gosh.
Somebody gets a bit off about this cheese.
It's just a big bar of soap. It would be very difficult. But, and that became a guild. And if it's a craft that people still use today, traditional craft is a really important thing to keep up. Mine is not as traditional as it could be. Definitely. I buy my wicks in. I don't make them myself. I don't dip my candles because I don't make pillar candles yet. But
I was about to say, is that something you would want to do more kind of archaeologically authentic or whatever you would call it candles?
Oh, I would absolutely love to do that. Yeah, I would love to kind of get into that and how they used to do it. Maybe not use tallow.
You might be kicked out of your house, I guess.
I don't think my partner would be very happy with that. But and I don't really fancy, going through that whole process beforehand. But I would love to go and, show people how traditional candles might have been made. Yeah. I think that would be something really, really interested in. For me, though, I'm an artifact person. Candles have a special part for me because I always have a candle if I want to relax, I put a candle on. If I want to write, I put a candle on. It's kind of a habit for me. They are, and especially when you get a good scent. Scented candles are a big thing now.
What's your favorite scent?
Oh my goodness. I definitely think it's my Crannog candle.
That's a good one.
I'm kind of landlocked in Glasgow, so it's driftwood and sea and rock salt. So it just makes me think of beaches and waters and bodies of water and stuff. And that's
anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
But no, for the melts and stuff, I think it's a way for me to actually make artifacts as well. So I make a Venus of Willendorf is one of my wax melts, the Westria Wife, and I do rock art ones too, so snap bars, which have pictures of different petroglyphs and different types of cup and ring marks from across Scotland and Europe. And that's me connecting in a way to archaeology that maybe I couldn't have done before when I was in commercial, and really getting to know the maker of that artifact. Like I was sculpting a Venus the other day because I make the Venus itself and then I create it into a mold for the wax.
Okay. Which material do you use to sculpt it?
I make a clay. I wouldn't go for the whole stone. Yes.
I'm so tempted to try, but I need like a month or so.
But I think it's interesting when you make, they're really easy to make and very natural. And so it made, when I was I researched the artifact that I make as well into candle or a wax melt form.
I love that. Yes. I love your little info slips that come with everything.
Yeah. And that's what I want people to experience with these candles. I want them to connect to the past in a way that maybe you can't, because sometimes it's not as accessible to get to a museum, or it's not accessible because it's, not on display. Yeah. So I want people to be able to handle these artifacts, even if it's in wax form, and see the cracks and the crevices that I try and put in. and hold that artifact in their hand. And for me, it's all about accessibility.
Yeah. No, it's really, I have to say I had a couple of Venus of Willendorf ones, and it's so hard because I don't have a big enough like wax melt thing. You know, you have to chop them up to fit them with the little wax melt. And I never want to chop them up because they're just so beautiful. It's like, I'll just leave them there for a while.
I know. I sort of sometimes take a bit of a relish though, just snapping a head off a little bit. But,
I'll save it for a day when I'm angry.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's a good time. She's not going to be mad at you, you know.
And I like that you do indeed use archaeology as like the main inspiration, because I think that, I don't know, it's a subject that, I mean, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing as well. I think it's a subject that a lot of people don't really know much about. So it's really great. And that's why I really like that you do these little info, you know, papers with all of your objects. But do you get a lot of people who like get a lot of feedback from people who maybe didn't know about the archaeology but are interested in candles, and then they come back to you with feedback about the archaeology? Or
a little bit. Sometimes people are interested and they're like, why would you, but most of the time it's like, why would you choose archaeology? That's such a strange thing. I think people get more interested, and, you know, there's many people that sell wax melts. There's many people that sell candles. For me, when I started this business, I didn't want to let go of my archaeology.
Yeah.
I didn't want to let go. Yeah. I just can't let go of it. You know, I was no longer in commercial. I wasn't out there doing it every day. I felt like I wasn't really connecting to that past. And I feel like we have a story to tell. I think archaeology is a story. It's just different types of stories, different interpretations of the same story. And I think it's really important to try and tell people that story and over and over and over again if they need to. Yeah. Because they connect us. We're human, you know, even if we're in the very distant past. There's something about, for example, the Venus figurines, especially I think Venus of Willendorf, that people look at and go, "No, gosh, she looks a lot like me," especially women. You know, she looks a lot like me. And to see that type of body type, I've had people come up in fairs and go, "Why is there a naked lady on your table?"
You go, "Why doesn't your stall have a naked lady?"
Every stall,
we need to ask.
Every stall should have a naked lady. But, you know, and then I go, "Well, this is the Venus of Willendorf. Have you heard about her? Do you know who she is?" And they go, "No, but I might have seen her."
Pull down your PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, honestly, if you ever... And me at a market is literally just me talking about archaeology, and I'm like, "Do you want to kind of buy a candle as well?"
Sounds ideal.
Yeah, and people start to go, "Oh, that's actually quite interesting," and there's something that's imperfect about it. And in this society today, where we value our bodies so highly and we put so much strain on ourselves to have the perfect type of body, I think connecting to the past, where maybe it was a different way of thinking, really does help. And I think when you interact with different sites as well, it starts to show you that the way that we do things now isn't maybe how we should be doing them. Or there is an alternative way. Yeah,
especially if the way we're doing things is not necessarily working, and the reason for carrying on is, "Oh, but it's always been this way." You can then indeed pull down your PowerPoint slide and say, "Actually."
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's something that's really important to me with these candles. You know, I want to give you an experience of visiting these sites. You know, I try and really put you in the site, and by the scent, the smells. And our scent is a really, really powerful feature that we have. We use our scent as memory. It's very much collective memory. I think a lot of people, if you say, "What's your favorite memory?" they'll probably add a scent in there too. Or what does that scent remind you of? Or they'll know immediately. They'll have a story that connects with it. So I think they're very important. And I think they're a really good, accessible way to reach out to people about archaeology. That isn't too complex. That doesn't require them to put a lot of time and effort into study.
Yes, true. Yeah.
And that they can experience for the 30 hours that candle's burning.
30 hours? Oh, okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
I like as well, like indeed that you mentioned scent. I mean, that's another thing. We were talking earlier about the fact that candles are consumable, so therefore they're not really left in the archaeological record. And I mean, scents are also something that you don't, well, although as an Arctic archaeologist, digging up a midden that's been sitting in permafrost for a couple of thousand years, like the preservation is very good, including the smell. So, I mean, sometimes you do get the smell of the past. It's not always kind of nice, but
yeah, I don't use those scents.
No, yes. If you would release that candle, I'm not sure how well it would smell.
No.
But it would smell. Yeah, but it is interesting indeed that the scent of the past is something that, you know, again, something like your candles. I mean, that's the closest we can get, I think, to that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a bit of, you know, phenomenologically.
Yeah,
you can say that word. I don't think anyone can say that word. Phenomenologically. You know, all that Ian Hodder stuff.
Yes, that one.
Yeah, him. He's pretty good at it. But I think, you know, you kind of go back in the past and you imagine. And it's not perfect, but I think that's the way archaeology is moving at the moment. We're moving away from the processional. We're going into that post-processional, where people are more engaging with the past in a different way, really understanding the past through a human experience.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me, that's how I would like to see the past. That's how, if I ever had people on site, that's how I'd try and tell them and teach them how to see the past. You know, you're digging this little tiny post hole, but this post hole was something bigger. And it was important, you know, as much as it's like truncated and pretty boring now. It was important to someone once upon a time, and they put, you know, a lot of effort into digging that tiny post hole.
Gosh,
you know, so stuff like that. I think we really need to see it as a more human experience. And I think with the pandemic and everything, we've lost that sort of connection. Sometimes I think we were so isolated for a very, very long time. We lost a lot of people. And even now it's not as great as it should be, but we should connect to one another. And that's what I think, even if we look back into the past and connect with people in the past, that's what we should be doing. We should be connecting with one another. So that's my little thing about the candles. And that's why I try, and I put everything into that, you know, I put it all into one candle. And it's kind of like a candle. If I say a candle is like a little mini hearth that you move around, it's a flame from my hearth to your hearth. It's as cheesy as that sounds. That's
lovely. That's so nice. I'm getting all emotional now. That's really sweet. No, I think that's really nice. Like, it's definitely a really nice sentiment, especially also about why archaeology is important, why candles are important. I think that's really nice. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So final little point. So because, of course, you are, as we've mentioned, a small business owner with Ashwood Candles being your little business, what would you say is the biggest difficulty you face as a small business owner? And what's the most exciting thing that's happened with Ashwood Candles?
Oh, okay. The biggest difficulty is probably just balancing absolutely everything. I work every day, all day, and it's hard. It can be hard on your mental health. And it also is, I think the biggest takeaway I've had is to keep the faith, just keep going with it and believe in yourself. Imposter syndrome is rife, I think, in a lot of different ways. Yeah. I think for everyone gets it. Everyone gets imposter syndrome. We think, I can't do this. And it can be very bleak sometimes when you're a small business, because you do put your whole self into it, because it's your baby, you know, it's you. You're putting yourself out there. You're going, this is my product that I've made with my 2 hands. Do you like it? And some people go, no. And you go, okay, that's fine. I suppose you don't need to like it, but you really want everyone to like it.
Yeah.
So I think keeping at it, trusting the process is the most difficult thing.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Trusting the process is the most difficult thing. I think that's just for every single person out there.
Yeah.
It's for something that they feel passionate about and they want to do it, but they're doubting themselves over and over and over again. And those little, what I call blurts, those little thoughts that pop into your head.
Oh,
and
yes.
They're just like, you can't do this. This is impossible. Why are you doing this? You shouldn't be like this. Don't listen to them. Acknowledge them. Okay, thanks for that. But don't listen to them too much. They're a tiny truth with a tiny T, and follow the big T, which is your real truth. I've done a lot of therapy. Can you tell?
I'm making notes here. This is excellent. No, I think you're completely right. And I mean, not just for small businesses, like you say, but for everything that you do. I think everyone has that, especially if you're trying to pursue something that you really care about.
Yeah.
That, in any way. I think it's because I think a lot of the time, especially now with the whole, capitalism and everything, where, you're earning money in your work. That's the kind of main purpose. But see that as soon as your work becomes something that you also are putting your heart and soul into, it's easy. I did it for a little while with jewelry making, and it was just, like you say, you love what you make, and then you give it to someone on offer, and they sort of go, oh yeah, nice, and then walk off, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, totally. I know you get that all the time. Any kind of market you go to, there will be someone who goes, oh, that's nice, but not for that much, and you're like, I put my whole soul into that, and you're like, oh no, please, just take it, love it. It's made for you,
Yeah. Have you seen that song, which is like, it costs that much because it takes me fucking hours?
Yes, I have. I've resisted using it as a reel on Instagram for so long, but I think I might.
Oh, I might have to.
Yeah, it does. It takes you a lot. And, for me, it's just putting everything, all my knowledge, all my 8 years of archaeology goes into one candle.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many transferable skills you have in archaeology that you don't even realize that you had beforehand.
Yeah.
No way. If you told me like 3 years ago, oh, Ashleigh, by the way, you're going to be a candle maker, I think you might have. What are you talking about? I was meant to be an academic. I was so confused. So it's very different. It's a whole different ballpark, but you can still do what you love in a different format.
Yeah.
And for the biggest thing, I think, for us was definitely getting our first supplier. That was, the Crannog Centre. As much as the British Museum is amazing, and that was such an honour in the British Museum to be part of that and to be continuing to be part of that. Yeah. When the Crannog Centre reached out, I cried.
Oh, I can imagine.
I was like, oh, it's legitimate.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, no, that must have been amazing. Do you have any plans to, what are your plans for the future with Ashwood Candles? Are you going to try and expand out to other retailers, or what are your plans?
I'm going to try. It's wholesale season at the moment, so people are ramping up for summer. Since COVID restrictions are quite low at the moment, then it means that people are buying more. So I've already reached out to a few other suppliers, and I would absolutely love to work with. So fingers crossed it goes well. I'd like to make more candles and expand the site. My website, I mean, not
That's all your excavations.
Honestly, that would be the dream. If I could somehow fund and help excavations, I would absolutely love to do that. That's one of our big goals, is to start putting money into community and support.
That'd be great.
It'd be amazing. But just expand the ranges into different types of eras and types of artifacts and things. So I'm toying with like a Pictish one or like a Viking. Yeah. But I just need to get the right scent, I think. And I don't want them to be bad smells. I want them to be nice smells. So.
Yeah. No, nice. Yeah. Oh, exciting. Well, I think that probably marks the end of our tea break. Probably time to get back to work. Thank you so much for joining me today, Ash. It was really nice to chat to you.
It was lovely to chat to you too.
Yeah, it's nice. It was so funny. We've known each other for a while now through Instagram, but I don't think we've ever actually talked in person.
I know. I was thinking that actually. I was like, I know exactly what you sound like and everything, but that's because of Instagram.
I could recognise you on the street, but it's all digital, all the fake, but not really. But it was really, really nice to talk to you in person, online, but still. And if anyone wants to find out more about Ashwood Candles or about the history of candles, you can check the show notes on the podcast homepage. I hope that you all enjoyed our journey into the past today. See you next month for another episode of Tea Break Time.
I hope that you enjoyed our journey today. If you did, make sure to like, follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll see you next month for another episode of Tea Break Time Travel.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network. And was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.